All right, go ahead, Mr. Friedman.
Zach, before we start talking about all the provisions with everybody, I want to talk a little bit more about your involvement with the contract. So, Corey, keep it limited, but can you bring us to page 4? Zach, did you eventually go to Saudi Arabia and provide services?
I did.
And were you obligated to follow this contract when you were doing that?
Of course.
And did you have this contract and have to follow it to provide those services?
Of course.
The contract references is Exhibit A, I think, on page 4. Corey, can you zoom out a little bit so you can see or show them where it is? Did you have a hand in drafting that Exhibit A statement of work?
I probably wrote it verbatim. Yeah. This is why they needed me to build out this part, this appendix.
Your Honor, plans offer Exhibit 18 to evidence.
My objection stands.
Yeah, subject to same objection, I'll overrule that, and I'll admit, what number was it?
18, Your Honor.
18. I'll admit 18.
Corey, can you bring us back up to the top, please? And thank you, Mr. Hagan. So this is the contract, program for the development of the GIP. Is that? Can you remind me what that stood for?
The General Intelligence Protectorate.
What is that? Like, if it was in the United States, what would it be?
So it's like their CIA. They have two services in Saudi. They have one that's focused on internal things that happen within their borders, like the FBI. And then they have the GIP, which is for everything outside of Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Corey, let's go to page 4, section B, where it says vendor personnel will perform the requirements identified in Appendix A. Is that the Appendix A we were just talking about? Is that?
That's the one.
Okay. So, Corey, let's skip the legalese and jump to Appendix A. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, Corey, bring me to 15, please. Page 15, paragraph 18. Okay. So, Zach, this paragraph says, vendor agrees that persons serving as mentors, what was your position?
Mentor 3.
Will be former employees of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency or the U.S. National Security Agency with a minimum tenure of 20 years or its equivalent unless the parties mutually agree otherwise. See that over there?
I see it.
Did you have 20 years of experience in the government?
I can't say how long I was there
Okay.
because it's classified.
Let's go to Exhibit A, Corey, on page 18. And can we, the objective portion of the contract, it says the Eclipse program will support institutional transformation through mentoring, training, and side-by-side capacity building. Talk to me on a high level. Is there a difference between mentoring and training? How does that work?
There is, and that's really what made this program very, very much the first of its kind. There have been other programs, other companies that were doing training. I mentioned a few examples in the UAE, but one of the lessons that I took away from that experience was that when you try to teach someone very, very hard skills, very hard to learn, take a lot of practice, a lot of discipline. As an example, it's a lot easier to go meet somebody at the mall, meet them at Starbucks, collect some information, pay them, be on your way. Give them a call on the phone when you want to meet again. But you would never want to do that. It's a very bad idea for lots of different reasons. So we have a whole methodology of how to do that the right way. But the right way is hard. You have to be trained up to do it. You have to practice it. And even if you have all that practice and all that training, if you go back to the place from where you came, this feral operational element at your organization that's used to doing it the old way, we found that they almost immediately default back to the old way. They throw the training out the door. Let's just go back to being lazy, and that's what they do.
Mentoring part?
That's what I was getting to. So the mentoring part is, we need something more. We need to teach them the techniques, teach them the trade craft, teach them our ethics, our values, and then we need to stay with them. You don't just teach somebody to fish, you go out fishing with them. So that's what we were doing. We were working side by side with them. That was the plan, to make sure that what we were teaching and how we were teaching them to operate aligned with U.S. values and interests. And what better people to do it than people like us that had the respect and the trust of the U.S. government right there in Saudi Arabia. So that's the mentoring part.
Objection. Foundation, hearsay, speculation, all of those things.
I'll overrule that.
Corey, can you bring us to page 20? The part that says Senior Advisory Board. Can we get that all the way down to the bottom? Just brought higher, bigger, zoomed in. Okay. Zach, this mentions a Senior Advisory Board and some folks underneath there. Do you see that?
I do.
Corey, can we go highlight the first person, the Honorable Leon Panetta, former U.S. Secretary of Defense and CIA Director? Zach, did you work with Leon Panetta?
I did. He was part of our team.
He was part of the team that was going to Saudi Arabia?
He wasn't personally going to Saudi Arabia. That he needed people like me, the operators, the trainers, to go there and do the client interface, and that was my job. Leon Panetta is just a legend in the community, in the defense community, in the intelligence community. Former director of CIA, former Secretary of Defense. So he brings a lot of legitimacy and trust to what we were doing.
How closely were you working with Leon Panetta?
Definitely not even on a weekly basis. But when he would come to Saudi, we would meet, we would have leadership meetings, and I had to be at all those.
Did he know you were and he worked with you on a regular basis?
Yep.
All right, let's go to the next name, Michael Morrell, former acting and deputy director of the CIA. Did you work with Mr. Morrell?
I did, and on the same level. Mike Morrell was former acting and deputy director of the CIA, extremely senior, and he was also on our board.
And how often would you interact with Mr. Morrell?
Periodically, as required. When he wanted to be physically part of the program and touch it, make sure that it's what he expected, and that was my involvement with him.
And we got Jeremy Bash, former chief of staff to the Secretary of Defense, and also the director of the CIA.
That's right. Chief of staff to the director of CIA.
Thank you. But separately, so he was chief of staff to Secretary of Defense, and separately he was the director of the CIA.
Yeah. Right.
Did you work with Jeremy Bash?
I did.
Similar amounts or more than?
Less than the first two.
Okay. Martin Peterson, former deputy executive director of the CIA. Did you work with Martin Peterson?
On almost a daily basis.
What were you doing with Mr. Peterson?
The same thing. I was responsible for training for all of it, not just the operations. I can explain more about that in a little while. But Marty really needed a lot of feedback in where we were going, what we were doing, and how I plan to make everything consistent across the different types of training that we're doing.
And then we got Paul Nevin, former senior operations officer of the CIA.
That's right.
Did you work with Mr. Nevin?
Not as frequently, and he didn't stay on board throughout the whole program.
Got it. And then we talked about Lance Hamilton, right?
That's him.
Is that the same Lance Hamilton?
That's the one.
Corey, can you bring us to the next page? I think it'll have his title in it. Okay, so Lance Hamilton is the former senior operations officer of the CIA.
That's right.
And I guess it's public now. And how often did you work with Mr. So we talked about how you were working with Mr. Hamilton before this contract was secured. But talk to us about how you worked with Mr. Hamilton after the contract was secured.
So Mr. Hamilton had a role. He wasn't fully on the ground in Saudi Arabia. He had a lot of what he did was on the U.S. side, facilitating the approvals that we needed back in Washington, D.C. So he was going back and forth.
And then Daniel Ennis, former director of operations of the NSA.
Right. So the NSA is the National Security Agency. They collect intelligence in a different way than the CIA. It's called SIGINT, Signals Intelligence, and Daniel Ennis, or Mr. Ennis, was responsible for all of their operations, was his last posting officially.
And how closely did you work with Mr. Ennis on this contract?
Daily basis.
And then we got David Terry, former director of analysis and counterterrorism center of the CIA.
I see that?
Did you work with Terry, Mr. Terry?
I did.
How often?
Daily.
So is there a way you would refer to this? Are there others? Let me before I get there. Were there others that you worked with? Don't name them all off, but
Yeah.
of this caliber?
There are. There were others. I mean, these are real. Everybody knows who these people are. So that's why you're seeing them as part of the leadership team we had other officers that were there too, typically specialists in various areas.
Is there a way you all would refer to yourselves?
Mentors, we were mentors.
Under the contract, but I'm saying as a team, was there
Oh, right. So I like to give a comparison. If you've heard of the Dream Team, the basketball team that had all the famous players, Michael Jordan, Charles Barkley. I know I'm dating myself with these names. Maybe you don't know them. But there was a point in time when the U.S., to compete at the Olympics, just gathered the best players that we could find. And it wasn't even fair to the other teams. So this is really the comparison for what the team that we had all in one place in Saudi Arabia. It had never been done. It hadn't been done officially. Never a group of people like this has been on the same operation, and it had never been done commercially. So I call it the Dream Team.
Okay. And what was it like working with the Dream Team?
It was fantastic. I mean, it was such an incredible experience and honor to be working with these people. I mean, I was definitely the youngest on the team, and it was humbling to be part of that.
Excuse me. Corey, can we place that down for a minute? We'll come right back. And can we pull up plaintiff's exhibit 76 in a limited production? These are one of the documents we've offered through the Anthem Declaration, and you all right, and let's go to 22, please, Corey. Zoom in on this. Yeah, exactly, up until number 6. Zach, do you see where it says Centers of Excellence at the top?
I do.
And then it lists 6 things: signals intelligence, Iran task force, field-focused operations capability, hostile area operations, all source, strategic analysis, and comprehensive security, right?
That's right.
Talk to us on a high level. Don't go into them yet in detail. We'll go by one, but what is this, Centers of Excellence? So what are we looking at?
These are the key areas, the foundational areas for the Saudis were the most critical points that we need to focus on to help them rebuild their organization. You had to focus on creating specialists in different areas, not generalists that can do everything. There's nobody that's good at everything. So that was our model, was to really focus on creating jobs that are tied to an operational reason for the job, and then training that's also tied to an operational objective in the operational job. So we just divided those into 6 areas.
Okay. So I would like you, if it's all right, to take us through them. But before we get there, what was your job at Dyncorp as it relates to these 6 centers of excellence?
So I was the director of training for the program, and this is the program. Different people have different approaches to training, and I had to oversee everything to make sure it all fit together. It was consistent in the way that it was delivered, in the way that it was evaluated, quality control, the mentoring part of it. It had to be consistent. So I managed all of that. I'm not a specialist in all these areas. I couldn't be.
And, all right, so let's start at the top. Signals intelligence. What's that?
Signals intelligence, or SIGINT, as we say, is collecting information out of the air. This is what the NSA does. I won't give you a technical overview of it, but it's very, very helpful for people that are on the ground collecting the information from humans to have something to supplement that with. Is that sufficient, or shall I elaborate?
Give me a little bit more.
Okay, so
What do you mean pulling things out of the air?
this can mean monitoring phones and communication. It can be digging up cables and making modifications so that we can monitor large volumes of information. But this really isn't my specialty. This is what the NSA does. And we were trying to help them develop a basic capability in that area.
So how are you director of training over something like SIGINT if it isn't your specialty?
I didn't have to be. I had the specialists. These are the people that worked for me. In this case, with the SIGINT Center of Excellence, we had technical specialists in all these areas.
All right, so then let's go to the second one, the Iran task force. What's that?
The Iran task force was focused on Iran, but I think it would make more sense if I explain number 3 first.
Sure, let's do that. But before you do number 3, or while you're doing number 3, Corey, can you bring us to page 26? And then, actually, let's start at 25, 3.3. So this is the field focus operations part of the Contracts Act, right?
That's right, correct.
Then I want to bring you down to section 3.3 that's right, thank you, Corey. And do you see where it says that, vendors shall create, develop, and train advanced programs of instruction to significantly improve clients' operations officers' ability to conduct the full range of secure collection operations to include operational tradecraft. Let's start there. What is operational tradecraft for the conduct of clandestine operations?
So operational tradecraft, this is really part of the COE that deals with operations as opposed to SIGINT. Tradecraft is how to successfully collect information from another human being outside the U.S. who has access to information that's of interest, in this case to the Saudis, and they have the right training to do that without getting themselves killed or getting the person who's giving them the information killed.
So let's start with the first one. Corey, can you highlight surveillance detection for me? What were you teaching them about surveillance detection?
So surveillance detection is really the most important part of tradecraft because you can teach them all the other skills, but if they're do this, surveillance detection, which is determining whether or not they're being followed, is all for nothing because they're going to get themselves killed or arrested, and the same for their source. So surveillance detection is just a methodology to figure out if you're being followed and do it in a way that it doesn't look like you're looking for surveillance. If you're doing things like in the movies, you see people looking in the window as they pass by to see who's behind them, or pretending to tie their shoelace while they get a peek behind them. These are things that will, if you do it, you can do it once, but you look like you're looking for surveillance. You look squirrely, I'll say. So you have to look very normal and natural.
What's the problem if I bend down and tie my shoelace and somebody sees I'm doing a big deal?
So if you have a professional team, and that's what we were training professional operators to work against professionals, they're going to see that, and maybe you had 4 or 5 people following you. They were behind you, one was behind you, they were on your left, on your right, they were in front of you, but only 4 or 5 people. It's fairly easy if you've had some training to detect that kind of surveillance.
Where are you doing this? Where are you teaching them to do this?
You do this out on the street. That's the only place you can do
I
this.
mean, you're training them to do this like in foreign places, in their own country, like where?
Oh, no, this isn't foreign, outside of your borders. They go someplace for a mission.
So give me a place.
China.
China, okay.
China.
So you got an agent in China, people are following him, he's trying to pick it up. He goes down to tie his shoe, there's 4 people tying. What's the problem?
Well, it's not necessarily China. This is anywhere, and it doesn't have to be to meet an agent. You're there to conduct an operation, any type of operation. You need to, before you do that operational act, it's called. An operational act is something if the local service saw you do it, they know that you're a spy, you're in trouble. So you have to determine how many people are following you. If you go to a place like China and you have 5, and you go to tie your shoe or look suspicious, They won't arrest you. They'll just drop you. They'll leave you alone, and they'll go home. But they'll come back. They'll come back tomorrow. But tomorrow, 300 of them will come back. And your vehicle will be beaconed. And there'll be
What's that beacon?
a tracking device will be somewhere buried in your vehicle. You won't know it. You can't detect for it. But if you use your vehicle, they're following you without even following you physically. They'll have aviation assets up in the air following you with infrared cameras so they can track your heat signature. They'll have multiple ways to follow you without requiring to be with you. You'll never see the same person twice. So when you're working against a team of 300 people with beacons and aircraft, it becomes significantly harder to detect it, almost impossible.
Don't want to tell your shit.
You don't want to do that. You don't want to do that.
And what happens if you get tagged? What happens, so 200 people, what happens next? Like, what would happen if they have all these people following you? What's the next step?
Well, they want to see where you're going and who you're meeting. And the people that we were training here and anybody who's in that category of intelligence officer, the most sacred duty that you have is to protect the people who are putting their lives in your hands to keep them safe through training for you and training for them. So it's a real violation of that trust. So that's why there's so much emphasis placed on this very hard skill to learn. Not everybody can do it, even with years of training. This is one of the key elements of tradecraft.
And then, so the next operational tradecraft is the recruitment cycle for the acquisition of sources. Before you explain that to me, you mentioned you've got the sacred responsibility to protect your folks or your sources. Are these the sources? I forgot the word you used. Is this what your assets? Is this what you meant?
You can say assets or sources or agent. An agent isn't the officer. The agent is the person who he's working with that has the access to information that he's training and meeting with.
So the government, the person that works for the government is called what?
We'll say the case officer.
Case officer. And then the case officer identifies it's called an asset or an agent.
No, they're not an agent yet until they've been recruited. They're looking for targets is the word. They're looking for people that have access to the information, and then they have to go through a process, a lengthy process. Sometimes it can take years to make sure that they're really suitable to be an agent. An agent would be once they're recruited.
So I get, and I always think of this like you hear about these movies where secret agents, but actually the agents aren't working directly for the government. Is that right?
It depends. They can. It depends on the information that you're looking for. One target is Iran, and one target within Iran is their nuclear program. So in that case, you're looking for scientists, nuclear scientists. They have access to the weapons program. They have access to the technology. They travel. So they're not necessarily working for the government, but it's anyone who has access to the information that you're interested in.
Okay, so but I guess I'm thinking about it, let's say we've got the Saudi Arabian GIP, they're a U.S. ally, and you're trying to train their people, right? Those people that work directly for the GIP, they're called case officers?
That's the term, yes.
Okay, and then they're trying to target Iranian scientists because you talked about how they're a foil to Iran. So when they find an Iranian scientist, what do we call the Iranian scientist? I guess it starts off as a source, and then once they become recruited?
I'll explain. So they're initially a target. You haven't met them yet. You haven't had any interaction. You're pretty sure that they have access to information, but you need to confirm not only the access, because if they don't have the access, you're wasting time, you're taking huge risks. It's a bad idea. So you have to go through this process of making contact with them, developing a relationship with them, and assessing them to determine if they're suitable for this, because it's not for everyone. It's very, very specific, the type of person that you're looking for.
So bring us through the recruitment cycle for the acquisition of sources. How does that work?
So the cycle, it's pretty basic in that it's spot, assess, develop, recruit, handle. And that's pretty common nomenclature in the intelligence community.
Walk us through those spot, develop, recruit.
I can't give you the actual techniques because that would be getting into more sensitive areas. But targeting or spotting, is what I described. You're looking for somebody that works in Natanz nuclear facility. You have a good idea where they go, the conferences they attend, where to find them. You go to those places and you try to meet one, and you make contact. And the whole idea is you have to make it appealing for them to ever want to see you again. We always say the first step in any relationship is you need to get the next meeting. So that's always the first step, is getting the next meeting. Hopefully that works out if you've done your job right. But if it doesn't, you try again. Once you have that initial relationship started, you go into the assessment part. And the assessment part is the most important. You're assessing for a lot of different things. The access and the suitability. It's not for everyone. You don't want to recruit somebody who goes back and tells their colleagues about this great side gig that they just got offered. You don't want somebody who has alcohol problems or drug problems. You don't want somebody who can't be trusted to keep a secret because it's a secret. They have to understand that this relationship, if it becomes official, is between you and them. And there's a good reason for that, because it's very sensitive and it can get them in trouble. And they have to understand that this is something that could get you into trouble. But all along the way, you're doing the assessment, and then if it becomes determined, you don't make the call yourself, but everybody involved
Who makes the call?
It's really a group decision. A lot of very smart people are watching the process. They're asking hard questions. They're making sure that everything is being done as it should, and all the boxes are checked.
So you spot an Iranian scientist.
Yep.
You go to the Iranian nuclear conventions, you assess, and now you have to determine, you need a decision from the higher ups within whatever organization you're training to go ahead and develop them?
No, the assessment and the development it goes hand in hand, and in fact, the assessment never stops. Even once they're recruited, you're always assessing. You could have been meeting with a source for years, but every time you meet with them, you ask different types of questions. You want to know, is everything okay back at home? Have you had any problems at work? Anything that you want to talk about, is there anything on your mind? And you're always looking for things, flags, red flags.
So the recruitment decision is the one that's made by the higher ups, or the group?
Well, you're doing the groundwork and making sure that you have the information to make that decision. And other people are, watching over your shoulder and making sure that they all agree. But the way that I like to describe it is the recruitment is a marriage proposal. You don't ask the question unless you already know what the answer is. Because if they say no, they're going to run back and tell someone, and it's bad.
What does bad mean, Zach?
It can mean very bad. It can mean you're arrested and thrown in jail, and that's the end. It can mean you're killed. It depends where you are.
Okay, so targeting capabilities to identify and access targets of interest. What's that?
That's what I described earlier. Targeting a target. A target is someone who has access to information. Every operations officer should be able to do it by themselves, but we were focusing on developing a designated job, targeters we'll call it, to work hand in hand with the operations officer to really act as a force multiplier and help them do that more effectively.
Okay, and secure handling of assets.
So once you've gone through the process, this recruitment cycle, the next part is you need to continue meeting with them and collecting information, and you have to do it in a safe way, even if you're in a dangerous place. So that's what this is. It's the methodology of meeting them securely. You don't meet them in public. You don't meet them in restaurants. Sometimes you don't meet with them at all. Sometimes you meet them in hotel rooms. Sometimes you meet them in cars in the middle of the night. Sometimes you do, in the movies, you may have seen two agents, usually say agents in the movies, they walk past each other and pass information very quickly. That's called a brush pass. It's not quite as easy as you see in the movies, but that's one way. That's impersonal communication. So you're only meeting for a very short period. You might have heard the term dead drops, where someone is going out into the woods and digging up a hollowed out piece of wood. We really teach that. It's not as simple as it is in the movies, but we teach dead drops, we teach signaling, we teach brush passes. There's many different ways to do this.
If I hollow a piece of wood and I put it somewhere in the forest, how do I signal to my agent that he needs to go collect it?
That's a good question. You can't just call them and say, hey, I left something for you in the woods. That'd be a bad idea. So this is part of the training, the ongoing training with the agent. So you would say, you would teach them how to do this. And one plan could be, you know the route that this person takes to work every day. And they're trained, they know when they pass a specific place, they're supposed to look somewhere, maybe on a wall. And they may see a very small 1 to 2 inch white chalk mark, a vertical chalk mark. And that's a signal. It tells them there's something waiting for them at this other place that's already predetermined. They know where it is. They don't have it written down anywhere. They're trained to know where to go. So the next day, they're going to determine that they're not being followed. They're going to detect surveillance. They're going to go retrieve this thing that you've left in the woods for them. And then they're going to have to tell you that it was successful. Otherwise, maybe something happened. You don't want compromising material buried in the woods someplace for a long period. So they have to do the same thing. They have to find a way to signal to you that it's been collected, it's been retrieved. So maybe that's another chalk mark someplace else, not the same place. So you're going to go check that the day after. And if it's not there, you know you have to go get your log and dig it up and try again. And there'll be a backup plan and a backup plan and a backup plan. We plan for redundancy. If not A, then B. If not B, then C. So that's the basics of a communications plan.
And what are the operational and reports writing and production of intelligence reports? What is that about?
This is the way that we would train how to collect and write the reports that go back to policymakers in a way that protects where it came from, the source. The intelligence reports have a very wide dissemination. A lot of people see those. So you don't want to have the name of the person that gave it to you go to a large number of people, because if there's a leak, and that does happen, you're going to get your source killed very quickly. So you have to learn, you have to teach them to write in a secure way that collects the information that the policymaker really needs and separates the operational details in a different kind of writing. So that's what this is.
Corey, can you raise to page 22 again, the Centers of Excellence? So, hostile area operations, what's that?
So I wouldn't want to call it the type of training that I just described basic, because it's not, but that would be the foundational training that a collector would want to have. But then if they're going to go someplace like a war zone, in Saudi Arabia, they were very focused on Yemen. They still are. So if they're going to go to a place like Yemen or to a war zone, they need other training. And this is more paramilitary training, special forces type training. So more combat arms training, close quarters battle, land navigation, more advanced surveillance detection, things like that.
And then all source strategic analysis?
So analysis is you collect the raw information, the intelligence, and it has to go someplace to be compared with and integrated with other intelligence. And an analyst would do that. That's not the operations, not the collector on the ground. It goes to these very smart people that know a lot of stuff, and they're looking at the reporting from one source, comparing it to another one. It can be used to confirm that it's good. Two people from from separate places are saying the same thing, so that's good. It's more credible. And they're taking all this information, this intelligence, they're combining it with the signals intelligence from the first COE, and they're creating finished intelligence reports that go to the policymakers in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, and comprehensive security, what's that?
Comprehensive security is, you still have to have physical security for your people and for your facilities. So that's what this was focused on, the physical security part of the project.
Your Honor, I've been told they were able to take care of those issues you wanted with the document. So if it's all right with you, I'm going to do that now.
All right.
Can we make a limited production of 76, please? I haven't seen it either, Judge.
You got it.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you.
Fire, are you moving?
Can we move it to evidence, Your Honor?
Oh, no objection.
Okay.
Subject to our conversation, which before this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Subject to our conversation before, I'll overrule that and admit plaintiff 76.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Hagan, can we publish that? Who are you reporting to in event that we looked up before in your contract?
Bill Purdy.